Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of Not the Girl Next Door. I'm your host, Meg Reynolds, and this week's episode is kind of a combination of a couple episodes and things we've already discussed, but I think there's a lot to unpack here because last week by the time this episode is out, but as of last week, it'll be 1 year of me running Next Door Creative and being a full-time creative freelancer. And I've kind of talked about being a creative before. I've talked about milestones earlier this year when I talked about a year being laid off and 5 years since being graduated from college. But I kind of really wanted to dive into this idea of, again, talking more about being a creative, but also just what I've learned in this year of being a freelancer and how it's changed the way I see myself, see the world, see my relationships, because it really has. And I don't think I would have such clarity on myself and my life. And I think being an entrepreneur and freelancer has pushed me in my confidence in ways that I could have never imagined. And it's forced me to trust myself more, because at the end of the day, when you're working with just you yourself, you have to trust yourself. And I say that all the time, but it's to a different level when you work for yourself. And I always say that there's 3 things in life that are going to show you the people that you can count on, and it'll help you reveal people's true colors. And that's getting married, having a baby, and starting a business. And because at the end of the day, starting a business, that is your baby, and you're basically married to that path. But those are the 3 things I think that will really kind of show you and test your relationships. And it's a huge milestone. But what I will say in the immediate is that I think a lot of the times why people don't get started is simply out of fear. It is simply out of a fear of judgment. And it could be a fear of so many things. It's a fear of judgment. It's a fear of the thoughts of others, the criticism of others. It is a fear of failure, of course. That's always a big one. But if you are watching this episode and listening to this episode and you are somebody who has not started that dream, it's time to take your dream out of the Notes app. It is time to put pen to paper. It is time to start making that dream a reality. Start making the shitty art. Start learning the process of what it is you want to do. Take the dream out of the Notes app and get to work. Because the longer that dream sits in the Notes app, the more it's going to fade away and more it's going to seem so intangible to you. The hardest part about chasing a dream is just getting started and allowing yourself to start that journey. I've said this before about how I'm writing my novel and it's going slow. Guys, I'm not even gonna bullshit you. I told myself I wanted to have that draft finished by the end of June. That is not going to happen. That is simply not going to happen. But I'm still working on it. And that is a dream I've wanted for so long that I think part of me is still afraid to let myself have it because of certain fears and stigmas or whatever it is. But I took the dream out of the Notes app. I took my dream out of the Notes app. And the other thing about dreams too is dreams change. And they should change. People grow. Like when I was a kid, I can't tell you how many dreams of what I had when I wanted to grow up. I wanted to be an author. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I wanted to be a political news anchor. That's originally what I went to college for. If you've been around this podcast long enough, you know that. And none of those dreams came true because they changed and I changed and they didn't fit me. And if I forced myself to stick to a dream that no longer felt true and authentic to who I am, I would be a miserable human being. And I think that's why a lot of people are unhappy with their lives, because they went to college and got the degree of something that they thought they wanted to do, or they chased a dream that they thought they wanted and they got it and they realized it doesn't suit who they were by the time they got it. And then it's almost like an ego death, honestly, to admit that to yourself, because you worked so hard to get that thing and you can't even enjoy it because what were you chasing it for? You lost sight of why you were chasing it. But at the end of the day, when you take your dream out of the Notes app and you make the shitty art and you allow yourself the room to make mistakes and you allow yourself to learn, that's where you're going to find your purpose. That's where you're going to find the meaning in your life, because it's another form of getting to know yourself. And I see this so much nowadays where people are constantly, I think the one thing people look for other than love in life is their purpose. I think that's such a buzzword now. We hear like, I'm looking for my purpose in life. I'm searching for my purpose. And I always knew for me, it would be something creative. I have been that way since I was a little girl. I've always loved writing and I've always loved art. And I think I'm one of the lucky ones that had an inkling, but not everybody does. And to those who are struggling to find their passion and their purpose, I need you to remember, like, you are your life's purpose. You are your life's passion. You are your life's passion project. Instead of thinking of life as finding ourselves and searching for ourselves, because then that puts our worth in this external validation, we should be thinking of life as we are creating ourselves. We are creating our identity. We're shaping our identity through our lived experiences, and our purpose will reveal itself truly just with the passage of time, truly just with us going through life and living these experiences. And for some, you find it young and early on, and others it takes 30, 40, 50 years, and that's okay. We are all on our own path, but when it comes to life's purpose, I think it's the one thing people search for more than they search for love. And I think love and career and marriage and children, that's where, when we say we're trying to find ourselves, we put ourselves in all these external things and we're looking for that external validation. And all it usually does is end up getting us lost. And we usually end up living a dream that's not ours. We usually end up living a dream that's somebody else's, or we end up living a dream that we think we should want because it's what society, our family tells us we should want. And I have not learned this more than I have learned it in the past year, because with being a creative freelancer, you know, you always hear people talking about niching down and only doing one thing. I built my business on not doing that. I have clients in the music industry. I have clients in the fitness industry. I have clients in the hospitality industry. I have worked with a variety of clients, but at the end of the day, what at its core, which each client has in common, is they have a story to tell. And that for me is my niche. Is I want to be a storyteller. I want to help clients tell their story. And I want them to know that their story is worth telling. Because a lot of the times too, with these brands and businesses, people think it's not worth telling. They think it's silly, you know, especially I have one client who, he's in the HVAC space, and he helps people sell their businesses and grow their businesses. And you might be thinking, what kind of story could there be to tell there? Like, it's HVAC. Like, and you could, you know, just kind of negate that. But he's a really funny guy. And he's got this, when we do our interviews, he's got this dry sense of humor. And he's, you know, a dad, and he talks about how COVID affected him. And he talks about, you know, what changed for him. And he was very open about how for a long time he feared failure, and that's why he pushed himself so hard. Because at the end of the day, there's a human behind the business. And that's what I want my clients to remember, is they're more than just their business. Like, they're a human, and their business would not be what it is without them. And all of that to say, that was such a long-winded tangent, but for any creative out there, you don't have to just do one thing. I'm a big fan of picking something and starting somewhere and doing that one thing really well and then learning and growing. This is kind of a different topic, but you don't have to only photograph one thing, one category per se. You don't have to write songs about one thing, or whatever it is. Like, you don't have to niche down as long as it feels authentic to you and you're doing it with a passion and a purpose. I think your audience will be receptive of it. And I just don't think that creativity should be put in a box like that, because I think that's also when we lead into creative burnout, right? And creative burnout is so real. I've talked about burnout with my therapist before, and she talked about how true burnout can take years to recover. And I've talked about how I experienced that. I think we all have experienced some form of burnout in our lives, but creative burnout is a different type of exhaustion, because when you're burned out creatively, it's almost like you've lost a little piece of yourself. And I know that sounds dramatic, but really just bear with me, guys. Like, as creatives, my fellow creatives will know this, like, your creativity is your safe place. Your creativity is where you go when you're stressed, when you're exhausted, when you're overwhelmed emotionally. Like for me, my creativity has always been how I express myself. It's how I see the world. It's how I make sense of things going on in my life. And when I'm so burnt out that I literally don't even have the desire to put pen to paper and write my feelings down, it is a whole other level of just feeling lost. And creative burnout, I think, really then ties into your self-worth a little bit. And what I mean by it's tied to your self-worth is I think as creatives, it's really easy to place the value of our creativity in a tangible reward. And I talked about this before, how I felt like I lost my ability to be creative for the sake of just being creative because for so long it was tied up in these things like a grade for school or, it was for a job. And so I was being paid for it. And I want you guys to know, I really don't make money from the podcast. I do this podcast out of passion, out of literally just wanting to be creative with it and build this brand. Would I love for it to get sponsorships one day? Absolutely. That is, of course, the goal. Would I love to take it on tour one day? Absolutely. That is a fucking dream that I am determined to make happen. But I'm still doing this podcast 3.5 years later simply because I love it. And I've loved the process of watching it grow. And I've loved the ways in which it's pushed me creatively. I've loved the ways in which I have learned about video and just all of these things of running a brand and building a personal brand. It's really helped me in my freelancer career. But if you've been with this podcast from the beginning, you've seen the evolution. And I almost feel like, kind of the end of last season and season 4 now is really the start. I didn't start from the get-go with these lights in this studio and, this perfect video quality and these amazing clips. Like I didn't start out like that. I am a one-woman team. And I think a lot of other people would have quit by now because they're like, oh, I'm never going to get there. The thing is, I don't care if I get there. Would I love to? Absolutely. Am I working towards that? Absolutely. But that's not the purpose. The purpose is I do this for myself and my sanity, and I do this to hopefully help others with these stories. And it's also brought me new friends and stuff. But going back to what I mean with the creative burnout thing, sorry guys, I got on a very weird tangent. But when your creativity gets tied up in those things of external validation and those external rewards per se, you are then almost putting your self-worth into that. Because so much of me as a creative, then it feels like, if I'm not getting paid or I'm not getting clients, then my art is shit or I'm not good at what I do. But that's why it's so important to stay being creative just for yourself, because then nobody can take it away from you. Your creativity is a gift that absolutely nobody can take away from you. And I think a lot of creatives, the ones that have this chip on their shoulder of like, poor me, why does nobody understand me? They're the ones who take it for granted because they put so much of their creative self-worth in those external forces of people seeing and understanding them. The best creatives I know are the ones who don't give a shit. The best creatives I know are the ones who are so confident in their work and understand what they're trying to do and have a clear vision and don't care who hops on the train. The best creatives that I know are the ones who you can tell just genuinely do this for nothing other than the love of the art. And I think those are the creatives that more often than not succeed because of those reasons, along with trauma. All the best creatives are fucking traumatized, but the trauma and doing it for the love of art, I think, are why creatives succeed. And it does, of course, with something like a podcast, it helps when you have a giant studio team and an agent and a manager and all those things. We're working on it. We're going to get there. But I'm appreciative of all of you guys who are on the ride. And because at the end of the day, I think of the podcast too as almost like a living diary for me. And it's really funny listening to old episodes and just hearing how lost I still was, even when I thought I had found myself. And I don't know, I can see over the years the way in which there has been a light brought back to my eyes as I've healed. And that is corny as hell, I know. But it's true. What has being an entrepreneur taught me about myself? And what are some of the lessons that have made me a better creative? Because there's a lot of them. I've learned a lot over this last year. I've loved watching the way my work has evolved. But I want to start with some of the things I've learned about being a creative, because I think when you're when we're creatives, we're not always great at the business things. And it can be it's a new challenge that a lot of people don't expect. I myself didn't expect some of these challenges. First and foremost, I want creatives to remember that once you have developed your style, it is so important to work with clients who love you based on your style. Yes, you want clients that you get along with, and you want clients that you can connect with. That is super important, I think, as well, with being a creative, is having those interpersonal people skills. But I would so much rather a client pass on me and my work because it's not what they're going for than hire me because they loved me, but then I have to try and make my work what their style is. And it just shows, and then nobody is happy in the end. And that was a really hard lesson to learn. And it took me taking my ego out of a lot of situations, but it is so much better to be loved for your style of creative work than to just be hired simply because somebody likes you. Don't get me wrong, it feels good. And I love having clients who love me and my personality, and we get along and they're fun and all these things. That's great. And you absolutely want that when working with a client as a creative. But from one creative to another, there always is a clear vision. And if my style doesn't align with that vision, please go with somebody else. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to compromise my integrity and my work to try and give you what you're looking for, and then nobody is happy. It's money wasted, it's time wasted, it is stress that nobody needs. So that was one of the biggest lessons I learned as a creative. Another thing, and I said this in the last time I talked about being creative, but you have to actually go out and live your life to have a life worth creating about. You have to actually go out and do things to find the inspiration you're looking for and find new ideas. Like, have a life worth creating about. Don't tie all of your self-worth up in just getting clients and doing a job, because at the end of the day, you're going to crash and burn. And it's going to take you either burning out or burning a bridge that you don't want to burn. And it's sad, but I think a lot of creatives get so tied up in how busy they are that then their quality starts to decline. And I've made that mistake. I will be the first to own it, that I've taken on too much of a workload at once. And my work has suffered for it, and I couldn't deliver, or I was late on delivery. And I hate that feeling. And so just don't be that creative who just takes on so much work and then doesn't actually take into account the time that they need to rest and recover and actually do things properly. Going off of what I said earlier, once you start attaching a monetary value to everything you do creatively, that's when you start to lose your creativity. Once you start, you are no longer, I think, being a creative. And I think this is I would be amiss if I didn't talk about AI in this episode. I think we're getting a little bit carried away with the use of AI. I think at the end of the day, AI should be used as a tool. It should not be used as a replacement for creatives. AI will never be able to beat true human emotion. AI is never going to be able to emulate true human emotion. And I think it's really clearly obvious. Don't get me wrong, I've used AI. I use AI denoise in Lightroom. I use those caption apps sometimes. I'm not saying don't use it. Of course, we can get into the conversation as well of the environmental impact, and I think we absolutely should. I'm not really qualified to talk on that, but I think so many people, I've seen people talk about how they're using AI to generate songs now, like literal songwriters here in Nashville using AI to write songs, come up with the album concepts. There is no creativity in that. And at the end of the day, if you're somebody who is doing that, you can't call yourself a creative. You don't get to call yourself a creative if you're taking the literal creative work and putting it into a robot's hands. AI should, again, be used as a tool. It should not be a replacement for human touch and human emotion and human experience. Because at the end of the day, you can sit there and plug in neon lights and chugging beers and all that shit into AI, but it's not going to actually know what the experience is like. It won't. And again, AI is such a larger conversation. And I also see a lot of people talking about going viral based on the strategy ChatGPT put together for me, or the niche that it put together for me. And it's that's why? Why? At the end of the day, there's a big conversation right now. not for nothing, there's a big conversation right now about how not everybody should be a content creator and influencer. And I happen to agree, because it's people like that are just relying on ChatGPT to build an audience that are really robbing others of opportunity, I think. Maybe that's controversial to say, but if you need ChatGPT to give you all of your ideas and help you build a platform, and you are leaning so heavily on it, like ChatGPT could go away tomorrow. If ChatGPT goes away tomorrow and you don't know anything about editing, creating content, creating video ideas, hooks, all these things, you don't get to call yourself a content creator and an influencer. You are relying on the robot to do it. And the same thing goes for all these accounts that are like, here's how you're going to go viral in 60 days. Here's how you're going to go from 0 to 100 in 10 days, whatever it is. Like yes, they're going to tell you good strategies and analytics and things like that. But the thing that those accounts are missing is, once again, the branding, the human emotion, the human connection. Those accounts are not going to tell you how to build a proper audience based on whatever you want your niches to be, per se. They're not telling you those things, because at the end of the day, you are your brand. I will say that time and time again. You are your brand. If you don't know who you are, if you don't know what your brand wants to stand for, your core values are, you're not going to build a true audience. Like, it is great to have 500,000 followers, but if none of them actually engage with your content, if none of them actually know what you stand for, you haven't built a real and true audience and community. You might as well have just paid for bots. I'm sorry to say. That was such a long-winded rant about the lesson. Let me get back to the other lessons that made me a better creative. The next one is, you can't have the big wins without the small ones. So make sure you're celebrating every small milestone, whether it's I just hit 10K on TikTok recently, last month. That was a big win for me. And now I want to hit 20. That's cool and great, but I shouldn't be in such a rush to get to that 20, 50, 100K without first celebrating the 10K and the hard work that it took to get me there. You see what I mean? You cannot have these big wins in life without the first having the small ones. So that's why it's so important to celebrate the small wins. I've said it for years that it's always the little things in life that make the most difference and matter the most. And I stand by that. You can put that on my tombstone. I don't know. I might want to get cremated one day. Anyways. Kind of going off of the wins thing, like, you're not supposed to be good at something right away. I was not good at photography when I first started. I was not good at cutting clips when I first started doing podcast clips. If you go back and look at those first podcast clips, they're going in and out of focus. Some of them are crooked. There was no text. I looked horrible. Like, they just were not, the lighting wasn't it. The lighting was harsh on my face. Like, it was bad. It took a long time to get here. And that's why anytime somebody asks me for my advice on building my podcast the way I've done it, or building, becoming in photo video, and every time I always tell them, like, don't strive for perfection. Perfection is an intangible thing that none of us are ever going to achieve. There is always going to be seemingly something you can work on, but that's the beauty about being creative, is everybody's eye is different. And this is another thing that AI can't really understand, is like, the creative eye is so unique because everybody's is different. My style doesn't appeal to others, and vice versa. Some people's creative style doesn't appeal to me. And so it is so important. To remember and humble yourself a little bit, that you're not meant to be good at something right away, and you always can learn something new. It's also important to remember, again, with the perfection thing, like, the most important thing you can do with an idea is just put pen to paper first. The most important thing you can do first is literally just put the idea down on paper. Maybe it is putting it in your notes app, but eventually we have to take it out of the notes app, and you can go back and work on it later. But the hardest thing is just starting it, writing it down, painting it, whatever it is. You have to put the idea. You have to go put it down on paper first, and then you can always go back and work on it more later. That's what the point of a first draft is, right? You'll get your thoughts out, and then you go back and edit it later. That's how you should treat everything that you do creatively. Just get it out there, get it done, and then go back and hone in on it later. Because when you get stuck on those like little fine ideas, you're never going to finish it. I think I'm the queen of like not finishing a creative project, because I just get so stuck on like those little small details that really in the grand scheme of things don't matter. Another thing too is, if you're feeling, and this isn't just about being creative, this can go with anything in life, but if you're feeling scared about it, it's probably a sign you're doing something right. And I'm not talking the like anxiety, like I need to like pump the brakes on everything in my life type of fear. But if you're feeling that like nervousness in your system and you're looking for almost reasons to not do the thing that you're about to do, it's more often than not a sign that it is a right move. And it's a sign that it's the right move because it's going to push you out of your comfort zone and it's going to push you in a way that you have not been pushed before. And that's really scary for a lot of people. But at the end of the day, I think that's when we're going to unlock the best parts of ourselves. And that's kind of something also being an entrepreneur has taught me about myself a little bit. I think being an entrepreneur has made me get better at setting boundaries with people, cutting people off quicker. You know, for every one good client you have and you love, there's about going to be 5 bad ones who devalue your work, who question you at every turn, who don't know what they want. And maybe I shouldn't be saying that. Maybe I shouldn't be talking like that. But I think it's important as creatives for us to have an open dialogue with each other and understand, you know, things like pricing and, you know, talk about the bad clients who screwed us, because at the end of the day, like no one's going to look out for us like other creatives do. And you have to know your worth in this industry and just in anything you do in life. But being an entrepreneur has shown me so much about my anxiety, because there's nothing that has clouded my judgment and my creativity more than my anxiety. And I think the times that I've been the best creative have been the times that I've released myself from the judgment and expectations that I put on myself, because I think nobody is harder on themselves than a creative, right? We put so much pressure on ourselves. But at the end of the day, nobody is going to, we don't have to prove anything to anybody. We know what we're trying to say with our work. And I think you have to be the one to just continue to know that, right? At the end of the day, nobody is going to chase your dreams for you. Just like with healing, just like in everything else in our life, chasing a dream is something nobody else can do for you besides yourself. So why are you going to continue to deny yourself that dream? Because there's going to be help. Sure, there may be people along the way who help you out, who cheer you on, who genuinely want to see you succeed, but they're not going to be able to do that hard work for you. So why are you going to continue denying yourself the one thing in your life that you have always wanted and have never allowed yourself to have? And I think that is a question we should ask ourselves, because it may get to the root of a lot of issues in your life. Is it, I don't feel worthy enough? Is it, I'm so afraid of judgment of others? Is it, you know, I'm worried that I'm not going to be good at it? Is it like why? Putting a why to that question is going to be the first step in you actually being able to chase that dream. But all of that to say, I've yapped for a good minute. I am so proud of the podcast I've built. And I am so proud of the business I am building. And I'm still building the podcast. But I would be like, not for nothing, I wouldn't be where I am at today had I not taken the time to get to know myself the way I have. And that's easier said than done. We all want to get to know ourselves and we all want to heal. And those are such buzzwords now. But it requires an ego death, and it requires a lot of time, and it requires a lot of honest conversations with yourself and a lot of calling yourself out in ways that are really uncomfortable. And until you actually do those things and hold yourself accountable, you're never going to heal. You're never going to change. You're never going to maybe even do the thing like chasing a dream. And I don't say that to put anybody down, but I need us to really get honest with ourselves, because it is so easy in all aspects of life to point the finger and avoid accountability under the guise of protecting our peace. But sometimes you're not protecting your peace. You're simply just avoiding accountability, and you're avoiding the hard questions and hard truths that you've been running from your entire life. Sometimes protecting our peace is just another way of hiding from the truth. And that is a balance that I think a lot of people have not yet mastered. and one that we all should take a good hard look in the mirror and ask ourselves, am I protecting my peace or am I running from the truth? But yeah, that's kind of all I got for this one. This was such a good one. I feel like I really am proud of this episode, and I hope you guys liked it as well. And if there's any thoughts that you guys have on being a creative or more questions about what it is that I'm doing in my life, you know, you can always DM the podcast page. You can send me an email. But if you haven't already, follow the podcast. We're on Instagram at Not the Girl Next Door Podcast. We're on YouTube. You can just search Not the Girl Next Door Podcast. It's also linked in the Instagram bio. Our TikTok is up and running. Just search again, Not the Girl Next Door Podcast. You'll find me. And leave us a 5-star review wherever you are listening. And I'll see you guys next week for another episode. Bye for now. Cool.